morning. It is good to be with you this morning.
Good morning.
Is this on? Can you hear me okay? I have spent several weeks immersed in Brené Brown materials, and I feel like I've gotten to know her a bit. You really should look her up if you haven't heard of her. She describes herself as a social researcher. Brown is known in particular for her research on shame, vulnerability, and leadership, and for her widely viewed TED Talks. In her book, Daring Greatly, How the Courage to be Vulnerable Transforms the Way We Live, Love, Parent, and Lead, she writes, "Vulnerability sounds like truth and feels like courage. Truth and courage aren't always comfortable, but they are never weakness." The chalice lighting this morning also comes from the same book. Vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, and creativity. It is the source of hope, empathy, accountability, and authenticity, your theme for this month. If we want greater clarity in our purpose or deeper and more meaningful spiritual lives, vulnerability is the path. So what does this all mean for us? Even if you recognize the value of vulnerability, how do we practice it? And how on earth does the title of your sermon, Grace and Peace, tie in with all of this? Grace and peace was a common greeting in early Christianity, especially in the letters of the Apostle Paul. Grace was given as a free gift from God, an unmerited blessing we could neither earn nor deserve. Said another way, grace is like the love that will not let us go, regardless of our shortcomings or character defects. Peace was the other half of this greeting, and to a Jew, peace is a loaded word, shalom. It is greater than the Pax Romana of the day and greater than the sense of go in peace, but more of a completeness or wholeness that is wished for you. May you be whole. May you be complete. May everything be as it should be. So grace freely given and peace unto you. You see, the path of vulnerability, Brené Brown says, it's the first thing we look for in others, but the last thing that we want others to see. So to offer grace and peace invites others to be vulnerable with us and sets up a brave space for relationship to form. When someone shares openly about their life and you listen deeply, vulnerability is a gift and the glue that holds connection together. Brown defines vulnerability as the emotion that we experience during times of uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. And it's really interesting. She said that before one of her lectures, the American Sign Language interpreters asked if there were any special words she would be using a lot. And she said that vulnerability was one of those words. And they showed her a sign that looked like a person weak in the knees. And she said that wasn't exactly what she was looking for because that looked too much like weakness. They said there was one other sign for vulnerability, and it was a graceful opening of the heart. That was the symbol that she wanted used for vulnerability, a graceful opening of the heart to let it guide the connection. To be vulnerable means that you show up to be seen with no guarantees. It's quite possibly one of the greatest measures of courage. Courage meaning with one's whole heart. Our connection with other people is only as solid and deep as our own connection with ourselves. How do we cultivate meaningful connection with others, with ourselves and each other? Around this time last year, I found myself in crisis, and I needed help. I sought residential treatment for mental health. I was afraid, ashamed, and felt deeply vulnerable. I would be asked to tell my story hundreds of times over the following 3 months. And through that, I began to reconnect with myself and my heart as I connected with others and listened to their stories as well. When I completed treatment and returned home, I decided to be vulnerable and share with my congregation via email that I had gone away to get help for myself and that I was deeply grateful for their support during my time away. It seemed to me that the time for venerable clergy had gone and a time for vulnerable clergy had come. If I ever had a chance of connecting with my people on a personal level, I had to be vulnerable and share about my imperfect life. The response I received filled my heart with love and connection as folks shared their own stories of recovery. Brené Brown writes that recognizing and leaning into discomfort of vulnerability teaches us how to live with joy, gratitude, and grace. I am so grateful that I opened my heart in this way and took that risk of being vulnerable. It has strengthened me beyond measure and is still teaching me how to live with joy, gratitude, and grace. You know, Brown also insists that emotion is our biology, it's our biography, it's our behavior, and our backstory. I love those four: biology, biography, behavior, and backstory. Emotion is tied up with all of those things, and vulnerability is one of their most powerful emotions. It can guide us through processing events. It can teach us about ourselves and our histories. It can foster connection between people. But remember, it is our emotional work. We may believe that we have to learn to read emotions in others, but that is actually a myth. We can't do that accurately. We can only learn to read the emotions in ourselves, expand our emotional vocabulary, and gently invite the vulnerable sharing of emotions from others. Brené Brown defines connection as the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship. She writes that owning our story can be hard, but not nearly as difficult as spending our lives running from it. Embracing our vulnerabilities is risky, but not nearly as dangerous as giving up on love, belonging, and joy, the experiences that make us the most vulnerable. Only when we are brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the infinite power of our light. So I invite you to go in grace and peace, to explore together, to connect, to be vulnerable, to embrace the risk of being loved, to take the chance to belong. Grace and peace to each of you. Amen.